YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, back in Total War, Warhammer 2, and this is going to be some Chaos versus Wood Elves action, and in this particular battle we're going to have two very interesting armies facing off against each other. Do you all remember that Wood Elf army that showed up in a tournament battle on my channel not too long ago? Well, if you haven't, you should go check it out. I'll try and get it linked there. This is very similar. It's going to be 3 Waywatchers, one of which is the Hawkeyes of Drakira, not the Hot Guys of Drakira, as one suggested. Then we've got a Glady on a Dragon, a Spellsinger Lore of Life on the Eagle, only 2 Wild Riders this time, and instead of a 3rd Wild Rider, there are 2 Eternal Guard, one of which is the Winterheart Guard, I believe is the name of it. Yes. Got it correct. And Winterheart Guard are unbreakable. I turned off my little info panel over here while I was playing campaign, and now it's off over here. I'm not sure of how I turn it back on at the moment. But in any case, that's the Winterheart Guard. The Chaos Army is an interesting one. A lot of times people like to bring a lot of mobility or big monsters, thinking I've got to break through to get to Wood Elf skirmish infantry. And that is certainly one way of doing things. Chariots, knights, warhounds, a big dragon ogre or something like that. This is a different approach, and we will see whether or not it works, because this Wood Elf army can, as you all have seen, cause tremendous damage and be difficult to beat sometimes for certain people. So if we take a look at this army here, is that like a sword sticking out of there? No, it's just a big spike. I had to get a good look at that. This army basically puts a whole bunch of shields in a front line. So Chaos Warriors, Marauders, Warriors, Marauders, Mirror Guard, Marauders, Warriors. You see what they're doing here? All these units, some of them are heavily armored, and Chaos Warriors are actually a really good unit in the matchup against Wood Elves, and it's because they're heavily armored, and they come with a very nice shield. And although in normal circumstances Chaos Warriors probably aren't always the best, in this matchup they're great, because the Wood Elves don't have great answers to that particular unit. They don't have a cost-effective armored infantry killer. So it becomes a pretty cost-effective unit. There are a couple of aspiring champions, also good units, very nice shields, very heavily armored, and they buff up the leadership of some of the lower tier units in this army. And then Forsaken are actually a great flanking unit and speed unit for Chaos as an alternative to monsters, warhounds, or cavalry. They are very fast infantry, and they slice through anything low armor. Their vulnerability, of course, would come to something like a Wild Rider, because they can get charged and killed in that regard. And then we've got Sigvald, and why Sigvald? Well, again, a dragon can't just land on him and kill him instantly. He's not a large target, so he's not a great target for enemy archers with everything else going on, so it's an interesting pick for a matchup against the Wood Elves. So what this Chaos army is meant to do is to just drown any Wood Elf army in a mass of infantry that they can't deal with. And you can see that it's spread out wide, meant to envelop, and be a pretty straightforward idea, right? You push hard up the center, and then start enveloping from the flanks, and then the Wood Elves will have to try and deal with that. Now, you all saw the Wood Elf army. Let's see how this plays out, because this is an interesting challenge. If you're playing the part of a Wood Elf, you have a whole lot of units to kill. You only have a limited amount of ammunition, and the question is, what do you target right now if you're the Wood Elf player? Go down in the comments and tell me, if you're playing the Wood Elves, what unit are you targeting at this point in time in the video? I think about 3 minutes 45 seconds in. So you're going to see the Glady here put a Prey of Eneth Rama on Sigvald and then drop a breath attack on him. There's not a focused fire from the Waystalkers yet, but here it comes. Sigvald heals, so if you don't get a quick knockout on him, he's just going to heal that off. So you can see Sigvald, he's going to probably, well actually you can't see it because I don't have it turned on, but he should be slowly picking up hit points. I mean, unless the player did not bring his healing ability, which I suppose is possible. The Wild Riders here are going to be used to give the Waywatchers room to maneuver. So you're going to see these charges coming in. Chaos infantry outside of Forsaken is very slow, and so Wild Riders kind of give you this option of trying to hold back infantry. Now you can see the Forsaken pushing through on the middle. They're kind of operating behind the other infantry, probably because they don't want to get smashed by Wild Riders on a flank. And you can see here that the Forsaken give them an option to push forward faster. I like rolling them on the flank, but like I said, it comes with the risk of getting killed by the Wild Riders, who are being healed by the Spellsinger. Now, the Spellsinger and the Glady are kind of hanging back, looking for opportunistic prey, And here comes the challenge for the Wood Elf player. You're being chased, you're being surrounded. Which things do you target? Can you maneuver your units enough? So you can see here the Hawkeyes have stopped, the 2 Wild Riders have stopped. He's got to continue to maneuver these units, and eventually he can't really get away with these Winterheart Guards or Eternal Guards, but that's actually kind of the point of those 2 units. They're meant to engage blobs of Chaos Infantry so that the archers can be more effective. So if you see a strategy like this, these token infantry units that come in these are usually a trap, so be careful how you engage them. Don't give them more than 1 unit to chew on at a time, typically would be the rule of thumb if you're trying to defeat this type of build. We'll see whether or not the Chaos player does so successfully. Look at the large blob here. Why are these blobs a problem? I'm going to slow it down and explain real quick. If you come blob up, you may be overpowering this Eternal Guard, but remember that that's a relatively small cost. And then look at the blob behind this. If you came in here with a dragon, breath attack right up here from the side, all these units die. Or sometimes people will bring a vortex spell. And a vortex spell, again, your blob is dead. And then it's the same thing over here where you're blobbing up units. Or the Waywatchers get back to an advantageous firing point, and where you have blobbed infantry, you're taking hits from the side, and your infantry die in droves. And that helps a player with much fewer units catch up in terms of the number games, because look at the number game here. This is almost a 4-to-1 difference here between the 2 armies. Anyway, just to kind of give you all some tips as you're playing a Warhammer-based Total War, or fantasy-based Total War in this case, blobbing it can sometimes work, but it's otherwise quite dangerous. And you can see that the Chaos player, like I said, is just trying to overwhelm the enemy. Now these Forsaken got a little overextended. They didn't continue charging the archers for whatever reason, and so they took so much damage now from the archers that they're probably stoppable by the Wild Riders. You can see that the Mirror Guard is now pushing forward to another well-armored unit. And the Wood Elves are in a full retreat at this point because Chaos is just swamping them. Now the Chaos player has done a pretty decent job at this point of kind of spreading back out. He did have some blobs going on those 2 infantry units, but now he's spread out. I like how Sigvald is kind of held here in the Winterheart Guards while other units split up and go after other units. For the Wood Elves, regrouped units can start running back in, and they will become a major pain for anybody playing the role of the Skirmisher. And so the real question at this point is, can the Wood Elves turn this around? They're losing units very quickly, and their key units that need to be causing damage can't be free because they're being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. So this is the numbers game coming into play. And sometimes the numbers game can be an effective strategy, and in this case, it's an effective strategy because the archers are having to fire front-long into these giant shields and heavily armored warriors, and so it's not a good use of their ammunition when you think about the cost of the Waywatchers versus the kills that they will achieve in this type of combat. What helps those Waywatchers pay for themselves is when you bring a target like Kolek, or a Lord on a Dragon. It's a large target. It's easy to hit. When you kill it, you take a substantial amount of funds off the battlefield for your opponent. So bringing a lot of cheap infantry with shields, or cheaper infantry with shields, becomes a very effective strategy in terms of nullifying the damage that can be done by these archers. I'll ask you that question again that I asked you earlier. If you're the Wood Elf player at this point, what do you target? Every single unit on the battlefield is a threat to you. Every one of them. You don't have an answer to it anymore because you're Wild Riders, and your Winterheart Guard is almost gone, and you've got very little. So running away is not going to be a fantastic option. Eventually, the Chaos Warriors will be able to catch you, even though a lot of their Forsaken have been dealt with, which is always a good play. You want to get rid of the faster units when you got to play the skirmish game. But obviously, eventually, ammo is going to run dry, and then fatigue starts to take its toll. These Wood Elves are not on a forest map either, where there's certain areas where they can get bonuses with certain units. So operating here in the wide open certainly gave Chaos the potential to play a large army of highly mobile forces. But in this case, like I said, Chaos was just attempting to swamp the Wood Elves and a massive ball of infantry. And this army from Chaos can be effective against Wood Elves in more than just this situation. Like I said, the Wood Elves don't deal with armor particularly well. They can. They certainly have units for it. But when you think about the cost of a Chaos Warrior, a standard one, it's a pretty low cost for a very heavily shielded and armored unit. And you can put a lot of them on the battlefield. Well, what are the Wood Elves going to answer that with? Well, armor-piercing archers, but those are pretty expensive. You could just use Glade Guard or something, but then you end up in an infantry fight. And how well do Eternal Guard trade against Chaos Warriors? Probably not great. How well do they trade against Marauders? Again, probably not great. It's just one of those things where, I mean, Eternal Guard are decent units for the cost, no doubt about it, but they're just not going to trade well. And then these Forsaken thrown into the mix, other than Wild Riders, again, the Wood Elves don't have a great answer to Forsaken at that cost level. War Dancers, you know, they can contend with something like this, but even they, with their low armor, won't trade well with a high damage unit in return, like the Forsaken. And again, the War Dancers don't trade well against a heavily armored unit, like a Chaos Warrior or an Aspiring Champion. War Dancers with Azrae's Spear are a great unit because of their speed, but again, they trade poorly with Forsaken. They'll probably beat it, but when you look at the cost involved and the purpose of an Azrae's Spear, it doesn't become a great trade. So, Chaos has some interesting ways to match up against the Wood Elves. They can bring heavy knights and sometimes be quite successful with that build. They can also bring infantry, like they do here, and potentially be successful with that build. But that's not to say, though, that the Wood Elves are without any response to Chaos. I've obviously seen my fair share of builds where a Chaos Dragon or Kolek get absolutely owned by several Waywatchers or other infantry placed in some type of ambush-style tactics, you know, in the woods. There are definitely ways that the Wood Elves can fight against Chaos. So I'm not trying to make the point that, like, Chaos is an auto-win versus Wood Elves, but they are a good pick, in my opinion. And they're one that I've used frequently myself for this very reason that you're seeing here. Again, won't be successful every time, but it's certainly a valid strategy that can get a lot of work done. I think the Wood Elf player knows that they're pretty much finished here, and you're seeing, to me, an honorable finish to the fight. They tried to skirmish, it didn't work, and eventually you just land your dragons, fight to the death, and you're going to have to call it quits, because it didn't work that time. I know some people think that these type of Wood Elves build are quote-unquote cancer. Don't get me wrong, it's annoying to play against that kind of build if you have to do it over and over and over and over again. However, that said, it is a type of build that you should expect from a faction that is a glass cannon with a whole bunch of skirmishers. So I don't think that it's quote-unquote cancer. I think that it's just how the Wood Elves are intended to play. And I know some people won't like that or may not agree with me, and that's fine. Feel free to share your opinion of that in the comments. I'm not here to tell you exactly how you have to think. I'm just making what I think is the point on the subject here. So Jungle Jim, nice build there, well done. And I think that this is an appropriate video right now, especially because of the one that I showed not too long ago, where people saw, you know, going head-to-head in a skirmish against one of these Wood Elves build can be tricky. Now remember, these two infantry were traded for another Wild Rider, and that is a slightly different scenario, but regardless, this matchup here is challenging. Look how many units the Wood Elves have to kill in order to be successful, and a Lord that does heal. He's well armored, he's shielded, he can't easily be knocked out by a dragon because he ragdolls. It's a good pick. It's a good pick, and I think something you should consider. And I like this type of, you know, slightly counterintuitive build where everybody always wants to have monsters and, you know, cavalry and stuff like that in their army, and that is typically a good idea. But here's an instance where basically just rolling a whole bunch of infantry is a good idea. And look at this, not even a sorcerer. No sorcerer for Chaos. They didn't even waste their money. They gave the Wood Elves nothing but low-cost, highly numerous targets. Dealing with 6 Chaos Warriors, 7 basically when you add the Mirror Guard. So that's a whole bunch of infantry to deal with. And that in and of itself is difficult for the Wood Elves to deal with unless they have specifically counter-built to it. And they can, but it's trickier for them, like I said, to be as cost-effective versus that. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if you want to support the channel, if you've watched this video and you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you didn't like it, well, go up there and smash that dislike button, and then get down in the comments and tell me what I need to do better. I appreciate all your interaction as it's enormously helpful to the channel. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, a bit of a different perspective on that skirmishing build that we saw a few days ago. Go check out the description if you want to go back and watch that battle to get refreshed on it. Anyway, thank you to both players for an interesting battle. I enjoyed it. Thank you for submitting. HeirofCarthage, signing out for now.